Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to equip you to become a master of scatterplots. We're going to build this. Check it out. Dynamic x-axis, dynamic y-axis, automation. We're going to prep the data set. We're going to go through all the steps needed to make you a master of Power BI scatterplots. So without any waiting, let's dive right in. All right, so here we are. You're familiar with this from my other videos pertaining to a dashboard that has KPIs, filters, products, etc. Today, it's all about the scatterplot, baby. Here's an example of what this sucker can do. First, we start off playing it. You're gonna see it moves over time. You're tracking information, but what in the world is it? So firstly, a scatterplot, let's make it simplistic. We'll drill up. A scatterplot is the method and the visualization technique you use to plot products or dimensions leveraging multiple measures. So for example, this big bubble called word is on the x-axis, a bubble because of the net units sold to the right, and then it goes up based upon the total net sales. So you control the y-axis and the x-axis with measures, plotting points around a grid. What we're going to go through for this process is a couple of things. Number one, I'm going to talk through how to prep the data to make this work. I'm going to talk through formatting. I'm going to talk about how to build the foundational visual. I'm going to go through this cool part where you can actually change the axis for end users so they can dynamically just update this however they want to tell whatever story they need to tell. Which is extremely cool, including the size, and then also how to drill up and how to drill down in hierarchies. So there's gonna be a lot. There's gonna be a lot of information. Stick with it, take screenshots at the end of it. You'll be able to build any scatter plot to tell any story needed. All right, so step one, let's get into the data. Here's the data set. Now, what I've done is I already have measures. Let's open up some of these. The green ones are what we're going to focus on because RT equals rolling total. And if you look at this visual, a key thing about it, you want to be able to do two things. Number one, if you look at let me turn this highlighter on. Cool. So number one, if you see the total, it matches. Units sold, total 25,000. Units sold, total 25,000. Well, the units sold shows what has been sold every single day. The RT unit sold calculation, which I'll show you, and you can repeat it, it takes the value and aggregates it to the previous value. So you can see the numbers keep increasing. This value, 1907, is 1,033. More than 874. The reason why you need to have rolling total calculations for your scatterplot visual is if you want to have that animation and play over time, well, that's what it will lock into so you can see time proceed. What I mean, I'll explain that here. So for example, 874, 1033, well, just having the individual amounts move around wouldn't work. But what this is doing, you can see it's taking time and it's showing the accumulated total for how things move. And you can break this down to days, to month. You can get very detailed with it. All right, so prepping the data set. I know from my data, well, what you always want to do first, especially when you're building a scatterplot based upon time, if you're going to be animating it, is put your date dimension into a table. Very simple. All right, so let's look at the calculations. Typical units sold, and I'll show you one, then the rest are repeating, so you can apply this to your own models in your own ways. If we go to units sold is simply calculate, let's zoom in as well. Units sold, calculate the sum of the sales units if the status is sold. So the calculate measure, it does aggregation, then additional filtering on the second part of it. Calculate the sales unit for status sold. It does that for every single day. Now, what we need to do is say, let's build a calculation that's going to create a rolling total for that. So that calculation will be rolling total sold. It looks a bit longer. I'm going to have it sitting up here so you can take it in, and we'll talk through it. So what this does, it's actually fairly simplistic, is you're going to get the max sales date, which equals the last visible date, the first visible date. So you start to incrementally create the ranges of aggregations. And then you're going to get the last date was sales, where you go into the holistic table, get the very last record. And what that's going to do is, for the result of this, you simply just calculate that sold number, which we were looking at earlier, when the date is less than the last visible date, while the first visible date is less than or equal to the last date was sales. So when you apply this logic, this will allow you to create a rolling total. I'll have a more detailed DAX discussion for that. This video is going to go into detail about scatterplots. But what you're going to do now is have multiple rolling totals for everything you think your users might want to use. So there's sold, rolling total sold, units returned, rolling total units returned, return number, return sales, return net units. I've prepped this data set. It has everything I want. I know I have my slicers here. I'll be able to select and filter any way I want. Age, gender, it's all the same. Age is the whole deal. So let's start by just creating first the basic scatter plot. What we're going to do is go into the visual gallery, click Scatterplot. Now, remember, sometimes you get errors thrown at you when you create this because we're placing wrong measures, wrong products, things won't aggregate. So don't be discouraged if that happens to you. What we're going to start with is removing the formatting. So for this, we're going to want to analyze products by gender and by age. I noticed that this is titled incorrectly, so let's just fix that real quick. Cool. All right. So to do that, let's start with keeping it very simple. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to select my product. Let's do this. And I want the product to be the legend. Actually, no, I don't. Sorry, the value. So how do we start to break those products up? Well, let's keep it more simple with this. We'll pick one measure and another measure to create the X and Y axis. So for this example, I want the X axis to be the rolling total of net units, and I want the Y axis to be the rolling total of net sales. So what that's saying is, what's the total money by the total number sold? Now, when I add the product, you'll see that the dots come. Those are returned onto the value section. The legend is going to be grouping it by color. So this already, it takes a while to get to where we're going to be, but you can see at least directionally, bottom left to bottom right, these down here are groupings that sold or had more net units sent back and lost money. These made money. So let's keep going through the process now that we have the basic chart built out. Finally, for category, we'll build the basic chart out. So what that has just done is, if we go back to the scatter plot, we can see we're grouping products by Office, Power Platform, Xbox. We'll get to the formatting and everything of this as well. First, we're just dropping in the necessary attributes. Our plot is created. We also want to do size. So when we're looking at the values to put into a visual, the values obviously we've already discussed, and this is where we'll create a hierarchy. So if we go back to this scatter plot, a very awesome thing to do is to enable people to tell the story whatever level they want. So maybe I want to see my scatter plot dots just by the product. That's this view. Maybe I go down to the next level and I just want to see it by male and female per category group. That's another option. Now I can go all the way back up and see a concatenation of both and see all of the products split out by gender and category. So to do that, product, gender, age. Oh, you can go down even further and I'll see the age per group. So think about that when you are putting your value selection in. So I know I'm going to want product. I'm going to want, make some more room here. Product and category is, or I'm sorry, for the size, we'll start with, product, customer. Again, we're going to build a hierarchy. So then I want gender, and then age. And we built the same dynamic. So again, when you turn on drill down, when you drill down to the next level in the hierarchy, it keeps everything as it is. So I'm just seeing gender. If I go to the next level as well, this is just age. If we go back up to the top, it's going to group them together, creating a visual of many more dots because it's everything segmented out. But let's still try to clean this up, make a little bit more sense of it. So to do that, let's look back here. Well, we'll eventually play with it, but let's start the basic formatting. So for size, and we'll make this all dynamic at the end of this, but for this same visual, we're going to go to the size, and what size does is exactly what it says, is it says, how big do you want that bubble to be? So for this case, we will make it dynamic, but we'll put size on the bubble. So now let's look at a few other things. We're going to go through each of these actual formatting properties, starting with size and style. That's very straightforward. The shape of the image. We're not going to adjust anything here for now. Title, we don't need the title. We know it's a scatter plot. That's pretty self-explanatory. The x-axis and the x and the y, we're going to keep those because those eventually will be dynamic. So we don't want those to change yet. The legend, always important. We want to tell the story of that being in the first thing people see, so we're putting the top center. We don't need to let them know what the category is. It's intuitive that these are categories. Keep things simple, declutter as much as possible. So one thing that is helpful to have on any scatter plot is the zoom slider. I like it on both. What this allows you to do is, like it says, zoom into a specific section, both on the X and the Y, so you can really get more into the details of any specific size bubble that's on there. We will enable those so end users can search around as they need. The markers. Let's set these suckers up. So what we want to do is first talk about range scaling. Range scaling, auto, data range, or magnitude. The difference between the two of these is that data range, it does exactly what it says, where the smallest value, which will be down here in the bottom left, is the smallest marker size. And the bigger one goes up to the top and it's bigger. The key thing about magnitude that I really like is it actually takes 0 as the smallest value, and then it takes, say the values of positive 15 and a negative 15, those two bubbles are the same size. So if we apply that, this shows that these are the smallest in magnitude, though they increase as they get away from the center or the nucleus of the scatter plot itself. For these colors, I think we have some nice office colors, light blue, Power Platform. We're gonna go purple, Xbox green, and let's just keep on trucking through this stuff. So we're starting to build it out. It's still not there, but it will get there. Anytime you're formatting a visual and it seems overwhelming, just go box by box by box, and it'll get you through the process to get this thing squared up. And I will show you how to do all of this. And at the end, we'll make it dynamic where people can pick their own X and Y axis, the whole deal. Category label. As you can tell while you've been watching this, that it's hard to decipher currently what these things are. Tooltips are important. We're going to add those. But we want to just show some information on this thing, and kind of scatterplots are known for being sensory overload, and that's okay. Some of them have thousands of bubbles. It's intended to tell a story visually, also allow people to interact with it. So don't be afraid if it's busy. This is one of the few ones where the data itself, just let it be busy. So under category label here on the right, let's make them as small as possible. Do not turn on the background. That's just going to create shading boxes that it's going to be too clunky. So ignore that. Put the text up there. That will just at least help people see the outliers. Now I can tell this is Power BI males, 21 to 25 years old. That means that they have the most units sold. They have the most net sales. That grouping of customers is quite important. If I look at the very bottom, well, this down here, one note, male, 26 years old, they're returning some products. So we're going to leave the category label. And now let's talk about helping get this, kind of the nice reference line so we know what's negative, what's positive. It helps just give that visual some direction subliminally. That's going to be reference lines. The reference line capability is quite robust, which is exciting. In this case, we're going to start by a y-axis and constant. We're going to make it red, just to show that things on the other side of this are bad. Style solid. So what the y-axis constant line does is, like it says, puts a constant there. You can have minimum line, minimum values. That helps me call it this right here on the y-axis is minimum. Max line, right here is the max. The average, the median, and percentiles. What's cool about percentile is you can scale this. Maybe you want, lower percentile, higher percentile, you can change that up. In this case, we're going to keep it on the constant for the y-axis, and we're going to have it solid. I also like to have it behind. What this does is you can see how the line goes over top all the bubbles. Let's put that behind. It's going to help with the visualization. We're going to do more subtle things with this throughout the time. So let's also add another reference line, and we're going to have this one be the inverse or the x-axis. And we're going to have that be red. Oops, sorry, I click it here. X-axis. Strange. We're going to get this going. There it is. Red and solid. So we have two solid lines. You want this one to be in the back as well. Let's also get and enable this kind of shading down, symmetrical shading. It's more valuable typically for logarithmic visualizations, but in this case, we'll enable it. And upper shading, well, we don't want to mess with that because, again, I'll make it bigger here. It's an unnecessary color. So let's create this to be white. And now we're starting to see this thing come alive. We'll make the transparency a little less, a little more, so a little more transparent. And another neat thing on the reference lines that I should have added too is data labels. So let's just do this for fun. We'll add another reference line, and we'll call this the percentile line. And we'll do it the percentile line based on the series of net sales. Well, I just messed something up there. So let's take that off. We'll add another line. Sometimes when you have weird errors like that, just start again. The line type is going to be a percentile line. We'll have it, we pick this line. We'll want the data label to show. This is the key thing. So as we have this enabled, we're going to turn on the data line. Now we can see that's 307. Within the data label, we don't really know what that 307 means. So let's change the style to have it be both. We're the percentile 307, but still, let's keep improving that. Display units, none. We're going to go back to the line. And again, it's saying percentile 1 because that's what we've called the line. So we'll set it up how we want it to show. So what that means is we're going to take this and we want to know the percentile, say in the top 80, the 90th percentile, 95th, really make it more exaggerated. We'll call this line 95th percentile. And now we can see if your units sold, because that's the x-axis, the units are sold are over 380, then you're in the top 90th percentile. So that's 382 net units, these are less. It's very helpful to tell additional stories with the scatter plot. Let's look at the markers. And another thing that's really subtle is how these have the border. That just kind of helps shape things up a little bit. So we'll come back to the markers and within it, turn on the color border. Very small, subtle change. It improves the visibility of what we're looking at here. We're getting close. We're starting to tell a story. It's not yet dynamic, but it will be. The ratio lines, feel free to play with these, but in this particular thing we built, they're not going to be applicable. So how do we make this thing play? What's that look like? Well, if we go to format the visual, there's going to be a play axis. And within it, because we prepped the data, where we have every date and then the rolling amount for what that is, if we place that date on there, it will go through these values, rolling things up until we get to the final value, which is what is shown in the Scatterplot itself. So we'll add that now. Clicking here, coming over to my data on the right-hand side, going to date, and I've created something called month year. And what that's going to do is it sorts by the month and year, but instead of showing a date, it's going to be the text of what that looks like. And it's the simplest thing to automate right there. You drop that on, and now it's going to go through all of those dates. And because I picked the aggregate version, it's going to jump in 6-month increments. Like so, showing me how things move and change. What's cool about that as well is now say we've added the play, so we have the history. Well, now we can start to do things like this. Tell me the story for where this visual moved from. It's super interactive. You can click it. Let's track this. Let's track the history of this. When you have a lot of scatter plots or one thing you're kind of looking to analyze, that's going to help a lot. Even on the idea of more. So in this case, I added the play axis for month year. Let's just add the play axis for the date. See what happens there. And we'll take that off actually, and we're going to add this. Take this off. We want to add that, their date. So now you can see every individual date down here for the change. So there's going to be more changes that happen. The visual is going to move a little bit faster, but it's more granular. Again, these are sub within the month, looks like every single week. So I can see the weekly changes. For this example, you know, again, you can click one, you can kind of see where it's moving and coming from. It's helpful. So we'll get to the end of this visualization. I'm going to take this off of the date and add back on the month, year, just to get a more aggregated view of this. Finally, in the values section, everything we hover over, we want to have more information. So you can see right now, if I hover over something, it's going to show already what's on the X or the Y axis, those measures. Net units, net unit sales, month, year. Well, we're going to start to get to the point now of getting this thing to be a little bit more dynamic. And a good way to do that is to ensure that anything that you might add to the drop downs we're going to create here in a second is in the tooltip as well. It's just going to give the users more information about any dot that they click on. So net unit sales, net units. Well, let's go with another positive. Total sold dollars, total sold units. Return dollars, returned units. We click in this now. Now we can see the bigger story of net units, 894. Total sold 35, 76, 901. You get all the details. And even if you don't want the RT doesn't look as good. So you can very simplistically just change this up for any of the values that you have here to clean this sucker up. So I'll take these off. And by doing that, you can even see, I'll stop there, that they're cleaned up in this section. Let's just go through the whole process and clean the rest of these up too. I'm going to remove the rolling total from this, remove the rolling total from the units total. And we don't need to mess with the x-axis or the y-axis because we're going to get into automating that, which is very cool. So now I've unclicked this. Another important thing to consider is how is the scatter plot going to interact with filter panes on the dashboard. Think about that proactively in your story because it can help be an easy way to rapidly declutter things. So I have all of these individual dots. Well, we know I have my KPI slicers here, or the filter panes. Maybe I just want to look at Xbox. Okay, easy as that. I can see Xbox. I can see that males 21 to 25 years old, well, they are just crushing it. They're buying some Xboxes. Least females 31 to 35 years old. They actually are returning units, smaller net sales. So this will enable the people who view your scatter plot to look at it for what's important to them, which is the key reason why it's good to include a lot of information. It's going to tell the whole population story, but then give them the ability to easily change things up. 31 to 35 years. Whoa, look at that. One note mail returns. Big time deal happening there. What's going on? Also, what's working? Same now if we want to, we can apply multiple filters. Maybe look at that for females, for just word. Drill down all the way to specific dots. So again, intentionally think about the filters you put on the pane, on the page to interact with the scatter plot. So we're going to take the next bit of time to explain this cool feature. And right now we have a scatter plot, it's working first. I mean, this thing is working. People can interact with the data. You've understood how to add any values, where they go, what they do, what the purpose of them is, how to do tooltips, the axis. You can create scatter plots confidently now. But how do we do this? Now that you have the insight, how do we build it so where I want the end user to not have to come to myself or the developing team to change the scatter plot y-axis and x-axis based on whatever they feel like. I want to empower them to self-serve. So you can see y-axis, I'm going to change it. The whole thing just shifted. Now this says sold number. We want to look at returns, totally different story. Same with units returned. We're changing the x-axis. Now we can see the amount returned, the units returned. We just went from seeing net profit to now analyzing the losers or the failures, where we can see, all right, well up here, that's a huge amount of returned. Net sales negative, $22,000 returned. That is cool. That is a cool level of functionality. Also the size, maybe we care about all these different size attributes. You want people to change it. This kind of stuff is when it's going to take your scatter plot to the next level. This drives interactivity. How do you do it? Okay, so we are going to leverage parameters. So to do that, if we first look at the pane or look at the visual, we know from what we've just done, we'll start with the x-axis, that it's going to take a calculation. Well, I'm going to create a parameter that's going to say, give me multiple calculations and let the user pick which one they want to use. And it's actually extremely easy to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to new parameter, fields. We're going to pick fields for the parameter. What I want is I want to have the y-axis to be all the kinds of money. So I'm going to pick rolling totals because we need the rolling total. Again, it's important for the way that the story tells. And I'm going to choose net sales, sales amount, and sales returned. Again, when you're building yours, choose whichever you think makes sense. Logically group them. Sometimes I've added everything, but that gives the end users a little bit too much to choose from. It confuses them. Keep it simple. So I'm making them think y-axis means monetary amounts. Very simple. I'm going to call this y-axis and hit create. And look, easy as that. So what has just happened, let me minimize these things so you can see. Here's what I created for the other report, but what's just happened, so we've created this new parameter, and I'll call this, actually I'll rename it, just to keep, oh, it's already renamed, it's fine. So let's look at this while it's up. So what this has done is, it's simplistically, first part of this is what do you want the visible label to be, and then what do you want it to do? So I want this, rolling total net sales, and this is a position. So I want this 0 at the top of the list, this after that, and this after that. But if we look at this, I'll close this. What I don't want is to have the rolling total. I don't want people to see that. So that's where after you create the measure, or I'm sorry, the parameter, you can go into this and actually edit it. And I also like to format these. So think about real estate. Think about, I want to minimize the clutter. Even some of these up here that can be simplistic, but I just put them there intentionally. So for these, we want to just have drop downs at the top. To do that, this is an old school simple filter right now, slicer settings. Let's pick it to be a drop down. What's extremely important is this, is you cannot have a select all. You have to force a single selection. So we're going to disable multi-select. We're going to enable single select. This is going to force them to pick something. So right now, also let's change the title. So we want here's what we'll do. We're going to come up here, the slicer header, remove this, add a title. We'll call this y-axis. This needs a label because it's not intuitive on its own what in the world this thing is. And again, format it so it kind of fits the vibe of what you got going on with the report. In this case, that's a little too dark. This is a little bit better. Y-axis, net sales, and we're rolling. Not functional yet, but we've created it. So we have the y-axis. It's going to pick net sales, sales number, returned. Let's apply it. To apply it, go to the y-axis and simply delete what we have there. See you later. We're going to go to the new thing we created, which is called y-axis up here in the corner. We're going to drop that onto y-axis. It's as easy as that. And it's so stinking cool because now what we've just done is, if you think about this section right here, when somebody changes this, say I pick sales number, it's going to change the value that's being sent. So now we're seeing sales number, and the titles are important. Usually I delete titles, but for these, it is valuable. It's a bit duplicative, but it's still important because they're changing, they're dynamic. It's pretty darn cool. Return number. So we can do this process one more time just to really drill it in. So we'll do the same now for the x-axis. Again, repetitiveness breeds knowledge. It builds it into your muscle memory. Build these things over and over and over again, and it's only going to help equip you. So we're going to go new parameter, fields. This time we're going to do the x-axis. Awesome. And for the x-axis, we're going to be intentional with these calculations because we want them to be the counts. So the y-axis is the monetary amount. The x-axis is going to be the number or the individual count of the units. So we're going to pick the net units. We're going to pick the net units sold and returned. Same three things. Create this. And what's helpful is, firstly, let's make it look the same. Let's copy this sucker right here. All you do is click on a visual, go to Format Painter, and now click what you want that to be applied to. Just like that. And we're set. But we got to change a few things. So let's pick this again. We're going to update the title to call this x-axis. And we want the slicer settings to be a dropdown. Now we've done the same thing, but let's actually update this. You can see we're going into the x-axis parameter that we just created, which switches fields. We know we don't want to have units, or we don't want to have the rolling total prefacing the text. And just to show how the change works of these numbers on the right-hand side, I'll hit enter and close this. And you can see, bring this drop down up, bring it all the way to the top. Oops, right there. You can see net units, or units sold, units returned. Well, let's just show you how to rename or move these around. So you might want to have them in your own order or a different way. After you create it, you can change these up. So I'll move this to the one position. I'll move units sold to the second or to the top of the house. Hit enter, close this out, come back here, and it's all changed up. Net units is now in the middle instead of the top. So let's go back and update that. Net units, we want this to be 0. We want this to be 1. Also, if you want to just add more calculations, very easy to do that too. Simply copy a line, hit a comma. You can paste it in. We'll call this units testing, just to show. And within your calculations, I'm going to pick, I have one memorized. We'll say units sold variance. And units testing. Now you'll see that this parameter has a new option added to it, units testing. Again, we're going to delete it because we don't want it. Units testing. See you later. And we are back to the chart. We can move these so that the same area, same location. Move this up as well. Close this field. And it's not applied yet. So what do we have to do? We're going to go back to this visual. We're going to open up the data settings. We're going to go to where we want this to be applied. So also think about the possibilities of this. What we did once is we dropped the parameter to the y-axis. You can repeat this process for everything. You want to have them pick multiple legend categories on the fly instead of chopping it up by these three things: Office, Power Platform, Xbox. You want to chop it up by more? Create a parameter for that. Allow them to change it themselves. They can pick whatever they want. When you build them something where they have all this interactivity, it empowers them and it elevates you at the same time. So we're going to go to the parameter that we created. There's an error on it, so we'll see what's going on there. Optional argument. We'll take a look at that. But we're going to take that and we're going to add it to the x-axis. And let's see what's going on. So first, in this filter, we'll come up to this. Oh, you see the classic comma at the end. Classic mistake. Get rid of that. So now we have net units, units sold, and it's interactive, and it is stinking cool. So say, for example, just to talk through this one more time, we have our basic points here. And well, we could add the size, but we won't repeat that 'cause I know you guys will know how to do it. But what's valuable now is we can tell whatever story we want. The number of things sold, how many of them were sold. What if we say, okay, well, I want to just look at the amount returned. That means OneNote Mail has been returning a lot of stuff. Return numbers, $66,000 returned. That's easy. You could just bring it out of the data now. Before it was kind of buried. Well, it's still there because I know what it is. But again, this allows them to interact with it with whichever way they want to. X-axis, same with units sold. So say if I'm doing the double counting, I want to see what had the most units returned and also had the most returned. Well, that's going to be a dot plot, box plot right over the top there. You can see right here. So with all that information, you now are equipped to build scatter plots in whichever way you need to. I'm going to show you one little bonus tip now that I was kind of working through to help with the dot plot idea. It's a little bonus material here, but for what this is, the scatter plot, again, net sales, net units, size, net sales. What this is doing is it's taking the products and essentially applying them on the axis that we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes. But a dot plot will take all of these and group them from left to right and make vertical stacks. Let's switch this thing and see if that works out. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. We're going to copy this. Oops, we'll just duplicate the whole page. I ran into a lot of errors going through this process, and I have them figured out. So we should be able to just do that here, get you through some errors you might encounter. Dot plots, dot plot bonus. Let's take off the play, and we're going to change this up just a little bit. So we know we have the product, we have the dynamic x-axis, the y-axis, and the category. What we want to do is group these things by the value. So I'm going to take off this category. We're going to move product to the x-axis. And what in the world is starting to happen here? Well, let's actually do, I'll show you. So we're going to change this up a little bit more. Say I want to know of males and females, what are the top products? A way to build that and spread it around a dot plot is to go into first the what. So I said males and females. And we'll pick the product. Oops, sorry. Customer. Gender. X-axis. Female, male. And you'll see I'm going to make something really busy and then I'm going to flip it and make it less busy. And we want to see then the legend. The legend is going to break each of these main categories into a bunch of dots. So you think about when you flip it and put a dimension on a measure on the axis, we've just taken the gender and now we are going to break it up by every single product. All right, so it does start to get a little cluttered. So what you can do, anytime you have an axis or a legend that's pretty darn long, I always like to move it to the left side. We'll go legend left stacked. It just kind of helps the readability, allows people to use it. But now what we've done is we've grouped the products, the same attributes, the same things. You can still do the same interactivity with it, but a dot plot. So what some people like to do as well is you can get a little bit crazy with it and add more things and now drill down. So I see female, male. Well, let's first just go down one level. Now I can see all of the age groups and all the products. we can see the clear winner, Power BI. We can see some losers, publisher, stream, Power BI winning. We can go up, now we can combine them all and say for every gender and every age group, show me all the products. Drill down, there you go. Female, this group, male, this group. Another way, another tidbit for how you can do all the same formatting, all the same dynamic measures, all the same interactivity, but it is important for you to understand the difference between a scatter plot, plotting products on 2 measures, or a dot plot, which takes a measure and breaks it up by segments, plotting dots vertically along the segment. So going through this, please let me know what questions you have. Subscribe to this video, subscribe to my channel, like it. I will keep making more content. I'm following the comments. Hit me up with any question. Enjoy becoming a Scatterplot master and impressing everybody with that skill. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye.